Many people have said to us, this is the fastest, we've experienced this is the fastest way to increase productivity and morale on our teams. And it's also to protect against the things that ail so many teams. We won't go, I mean, we could do much more here, but we've talked about already burnout, silos and misalignment, which we talked about the priority of talking about projects. That really hinders projects when there's silos and misalignment, and also unproductive meetings. And we could go on and on and on. I'm sure there are ways that some of you have experienced that. Even if it's not in the organization that you're in now, sometimes we like to say to people, think about a great team that you were a part of and how fun and how energizing and how productive that is, and contrast that with a challenging team that you were a part of, best or worst team, and where there's issues of burnout and silos and misalignment and unproductive meetings. We want to help make those things better for the work that individuals and organizations do together. At a high level, when we think about, and really this is how Working Genius was first kind of discovered and come upon through Pat and their organization, was through highlighting 3 distinct phases of work. Again, when we think through the productivity lens, first of all, there's a phase of ideation, where we're coming up with new ideas. And what happens for many organizations is they jump immediately from ideation to the 3rd phase of implementation. Okay, how are we going to take those ideas and make them happen, bring them to implementation? But there's a middle phase of work that sometimes gets skipped. It's called activation. And that's really where we're moving from those ideas and refining them and getting people on board so that we can then most effectively put the ideas into place by way of implementation. Here's a look at the 6 different types of geniuses. And you see that there's 2 geniuses under each of these 3 phases of work. So the wonder and invention is in this ideation phase, coming up with new ideas. We'll unpack these a little bit more here in a moment. Again, as I said, people sometimes jump from those ideas to the enablement side and the tenacity side. I also always like to say that we're not talking in psychological language here that enable people so often through that lens think of enablement as a bad thing, like, are you enabling bad behavior? That's not the way we're talking about it here. Enablement is the desire to say, I want to help. How can I help enable this idea so that it gets brought into completion? But the middle phase that we need there, the activation, is discernment and galvanizing. Again, feel free to jump in through the chat or through raising your hand with a question if you want. And we've got a space where we'll have some specific questions, but I'm introducing you to the model here now. Let me give a little bit more for those who maybe haven't had any introduction, just by way of description through these 6 types of geniuses. And you'll see this here quickly. Keep in mind these 3 phases of work. We won't go through this all in detail. This will give you a glimpse of kind of what happens at each of these different 6 phases. So think about the wanderer is asking big questions. I wonder why it's this way. They're questioning the status quo, as it says there. They're asking big questions. The inventor loves to react to that and to say, oh, let's come up with an idea. Pat Lencioni would say that invention is one of his geniuses. And it was somebody on his team that had the genius of wonder that began asking, Pat, why do you think it's like this way, that we see this in so many organizations? And then Pat's like, I'm going to come up with a model to figure this out. And he wants to invent something that's going to help address that issue. Now, as we begin to move into that middle phase of activation, the discerners have a sense of, ooh, I think this is a great idea, or this needs to be improved, or that might work, but we maybe need to tweak it in this way. And they're refining what the inventor has come up with. The galvanizer loves to rally the troops. They're important for getting people on board and rallying everybody else to say, let's get this into action. The enablement people are the ones that say, all right, now that we've got this idea, I want to help make it happen. They are so essential. All of these are essential for the support of the idea. And then the tenacity people are necessary because they love to accomplish deadlines. They love to get it done. They get joy and energize it. They're energized by checking off the task list and the sense of completion. They want to hit the deadlines and they're going to push through to the completion. Now I want to begin to engage you a little bit here again as well. I'll just quickly move back through this and let me put up these 3 phases. I can't see all of your screens right now, but either raise your hand or just begin to speak out loud. I want one of you to tell me about a recent project. I'd love to hear how you've seen the movement of this project through these 6 phases, through these 3 phases of work and these 6 geniuses, or maybe if it potentially skipped a phase and what happened there. Somebody jump in and comment on this.
Yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, so actually, funny, I'm working on this right now with our HR department. So I have wanted to bring a employee of the month program to our district. And I talked about it a couple of years ago when I started here, and it just never really got anywhere. But we have a brand new assistant soup of HR, and I was able to meet with him this week and really quickly kind of move through these wheels. So we're definitely now even in that implementation phase of things super quickly, from that ideology to bringing in people and getting excited about it. And now we're going to launch the program at the beginning of the year. So it's been, I just kind of noticing that just this week in the work that we've done.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Nicole, for saying that. Nicole, have you done the Working Genius assessment yourself?
I have not, but I'm quickly learning where I fall into these categories very, very quickly.
Great. And where do you think you fall, if you don't mind saying for everybody?
I would definitely be more in the discernment and galvanizing phase of it.
Yes.
Probably, I mean, I can do the others, but I'm definitely more a rallier of the troops.
Yeah, I was wondering about that already hearing some of those components where you're like, you want to rally the troops. That's that galvanizing. You may find, many people find that your 2 geniuses, they may fall in one of these 3 phases of work, but they don't always. In fact, some people could have their 2 primary geniuses be wonder and tenacity. So they're at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Your geniuses can be all over the place. Sometimes they are in that same phase, but I'm hearing that. So just to kind of track it, maybe think about a different project, but what I was hearing from Nicole, maybe there's some sense of that ideation. What could we do? Maybe some asking of questions. What could we do to better engage our people? Then there's some invention. Maybe we could utilize a tool like Working Genius. Then there's some discernment. And then there's got to be some galvanizing, getting people on board. Then there's going to have to be some of the practical steps of implementation to begin to make it happen, to bring it into the district. Does anybody else want to jump in and comment in this regard through a potential project, or maybe even where you saw a project that missed a particular phase and how that impacted it?
I can share CalSPRA. We're in the middle of implementing a new member management system and website. So the wonder was us going can't we be a little bit better at the way that we are engaging members? One of the biggest drivers has honestly been our website. We're public relations people, and we're not thrilled with our website presence, and that it just seems like the cobbler's shoes kind of thing. Our website should be amazing. And then invention was kind of talking about, okay, well, what if we change systems? When is a good time of year to do that?
Right.
Do we want to undertake something like that? Discernment, we invited 3 top companies to present to the entire team and had a rubric and really went through and rated them all. Galvanizing, we kind of have pulled together the team. Our whole extended board has been invited to be part of the process. And enablement, we're kind of at the point where we're in the middle of enablement and tenacity. Tenacity is not one of my strengths, and I'm literally in the middle of moving member data from one spreadsheet export to a spreadsheet import of a completely different system, and it's driving me absolutely crazy. So yes, people, I love data, but not right now.
Or maybe, as we said earlier, Trinette, you and I individually, it's a different use and application of data.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. So for all of the, thanks, Trinette, for saying, were you done there? I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. Can I just highlight for the rest of you, pay attention to what Trinette said, as she, and as Nicole did as well, walk through these different phases and notice some of those dynamics. One of the things, so Pat uses the language of geniuses or frustrations. I'll say more about that in a moment, but we find it most helpful maybe to talk about what's energizing to you and what's draining for you. And what Trinette was saying, if I may paraphrase it in my language, is some of the tenacity work of we've got to just transfer all of this information to a new form, new system. And so it's this kind of like what feels to you is very tedious, that's draining for you. That's a really important part. That piece is like a gold nugget. And it's one of the things that people have been loving about Working Genius, because it touches that burnout piece and it touches the projects piece, maybe not as much the meetings piece, but those two of those big areas we started with. So we'll say a little bit more about this as well as we begin to crystallize it, but thank you. So what I'm hoping that at this point already is that you can see these 6 geniuses and even just the 3 phases of work and how we need each to begin to work through effectively. Let me carry on, if I may, with a little bit more about just an orientation to the model, and then we'll continue to weave in some discussion and some particular application. I will skip back through this quickly. One of the other things that we like to highlight, imagine that line that I just showed you with the 6 different geniuses and the 3 phases of work. We like to talk about the altitude of geniuses, and this does not mean that those at the higher altitude are better or that they're higher or smarter. Think about an airplane, and somebody say it out loud. What happens when you're flying and there's a sudden jump in elevation, a sudden shift in elevation? What do we call that?
Terrifying.
Terrifying. Okay, great. I like that word. The word that we
Turbulence.
Turbulence. Yeah, turbulence is the word. And in fact, I was recently doing this with a cabinet of a school district, and one of the individuals in that cabinet gave me new language, which I loved. I've always had been using the word turbulence, and they said, I think turbulence is not the proper terminology anymore. They said pilots are talking about it as rough air, and I'm like, great, I can go with that. Think about, again, we're just teasing out some of these areas. We talked about meetings. Think about the quote, rough air or turbulence, or I'm not sure who's the one who said it. I loved the term though. It's terrifying when there's a sudden jump in elevation. People experience that in meetings. Let me give you an example. Last October, one of the school districts that I've been working with, they had a new high school that was about to open, or they had a new high school that had opened a few years ago. This past May was their first class of graduating seniors. So I'm with the leadership team, principal and APs, but they had a broader leadership team there, about 15 people. I've been doing some work with this leadership team. And so think about it, we're last October, they're talking about the very first graduating class from their high school. Where should they be in terms of their altitude? Somewhere up top, right? 30,000, 20, they're definitely in that ideation phase. One of the individuals who happened to have the geniuses of both enablement and tenacity, and particularly strong on tenacity. And we like to say your geniuses are like a magnetic pull. You can't help it that they tend to pull in that direction. We're in October, we're in this session where we're talking about what would we do with our very first ever graduating high school class. And one individual, really great team member, happens to be one of the assistant principals at the school, raised their hand and said, we haven't decided who's doing lockup yet. They wanted to know who was going to lock up after graduation was done. They were so in the tenacity details. They were like, I can't help but think about anything else until we decide who's doing lockup. And if that caused this frustration in the meeting, and it's turbulence, it's frustrating for people. So understanding where you are in the phases of work, what kind of altitude you are, will significantly help meetings. Okay, let me see if there's any comment or question here before we continue to kind of walk through some things with the model. Is that resonating with you? seeing some head nods for those that I can see. Good. Okay, yeah, people are finding that super helpful. I'll say more about that as we move through a little bit later today about how you can really implement that in a way that can help maximize meetings. But for now, let's walk through a couple of aspects of the model. I said this was 80% productivity, and we've been talking about some of those aspects, but there is an aspect of self-awareness to this, and or of a form of personality. Here's some other highlights that we like to give at a high level. Every job is a 6-letter job. A couple of you already highlighted aspects of that. What Trinette mentioned at CalSPRA, what Nicole mentioned in her orientation. I don't want to distract you all from the work that we're doing here, but even if people have seen this and they've said, think about the mode that we're in right now, maybe you've gone on a recent summer vacation or something like that, or you have one upcoming. Planning a summer vacation, or even something as simple as planning a birthday party, you could see these 6 phases. We like to say almost every job is a 6-letter job, even if it's your vacation starts with I wonder what we could do for vacation for this summer. And then you invent. And then sometimes when I've shared that, people have said, but we have done the same thing for the last 12 years. I love it. That's great to have traditions. But maybe the same thing that you've done 12 years ago or 13 years ago started with some of that sense of wonder and ideation and invention, and then some discernment. Does that fit within our budget? Is that a good idea? Is that a good place to go? And then a galvanizing. Who do we need to get on board? And then you got to move it to some enablement. Well, how are we going to make this happen? And who's going to do what? And the tenacity. Have we purchased our tickets on time and whatever? Like, you've got to move through all of these phases to get almost anything done. So let me go back here again. We like to talk about categories. Again, the language that Pat uses is genius, which means it really comes naturally to you. It's like that magnetic pull. Your competency, you can do it, but it's not your favorite thing. And your frustration. I probably prefer the language of draining, energizing for your geniuses, frustrating or draining for your frustrations. Sometimes we've had people say, but I think I'm good at all 6 of these. And I say, good for you. And maybe you are. And I don't really say thank you for your humility, but I have to admit that I've had a time or two that I've thought about it when somebody's like, I'm a genius at all 6 of these. Like, awesome, you're perfect at everything. And it also to say, like, your job may require you to do things that are not in your genius area. This is not a free pass to say you don't have to do them. But what we want to do is we want to highlight a ranking, not a rating. You might be good at some of these things, but they may not be what really energizes you. And so we want to pay attention. If you had to force rank your top 2, those what we call your geniuses, your middle 2, which would be your competencies, and your bottom 2, which are going to be the most draining for you. If you had to force rank, what would they be? Another practical aspect of this is speed of recovery. This is going to help us on the burnout, both for you and for your team members. let me tell you another little kind of snippet story. You'd be surprised. I'm surprised at times when I'm with high level, really smart, really successful people, executive teams, school leadership teams, cabinet members. And I'll sometimes ask with a smallish team, I'll ask, tell me what, or in an individual one-on-one coaching session, I'll say, tell me what you've been enjoying about your work lately. And it is surprising how many times I get a long pause to that question. And people are like, I don't know. So I've done this lots of times with school leadership. And because of the nature of different individuals, I can be with a principal and their APs, their assistant principals, and they'll all have a slightly different answer. One of them will say, when I say, what, it's okay, let's look at this. What really energizes you? And one of them will say, I just get so energized by being in a classroom. If I can just pop in some classrooms, observe some education, it's just, I get so fired up. Some of them, it's like, I love being out on the quad during lunch, or out on the corner welcoming families when they come in. Those are different things. But I'll say, find what is very energizing for you, and then put that on the front end or the back end of when you have to do things that are draining for you. I'm just giving right now, I don't know, in case you're not noticing it, I'm giving you a very practical tool to help yourself and your team members in regards to this issue of burnout, to being energized. What do you do like right now running this Zoom call and this PowerPoint? I've got my computer plugged in, because if I don't, there's going to, at the end of this, it's going to be draining on my battery, right? So I have to charge it. Think about maybe a better illustration would be if you're going to be running off to a meeting and you know that your cell phone needs to be charged, you're going to either charge it before you're out for a half day, or you're going to charge it after you get back from that time. So here again, and another just kind of, let me just anticipate, because I've done this so many times. People say, I don't have time. I don't have time. So think about a principal of a school. And again, maybe some of you in your particular roles, they say, I've got to do these pieces and it's so draining for me and I have to do all this stuff. I'll say, can you carve out 20 minutes, either on the front end of that or on the back end of that? Give yourself an hour to work on the report that you find so draining, and then 20 minutes, either beforehand or afterhand, to go do whatever it is that energizes you. Stick your head in a classroom, go out for a lunchtime and visit with students, whatever the thing is, and then that will help you be energized and resist burnout in your work. It'll help others and your teammates. I've got one or two more slides, maybe two more slides, and then we're going to pause for some more discussion, and then we're going to really move it to some practical application, okay? If we're seeing things in the chat that I need to pause for, let me know. As with any self-awareness tool, here's another couple of areas that we really like to highlight that are really important. One of the benefits of self-awareness is not only that it helps us work more effectively for ourselves and for others with our teams, but it helps in these two aspects, what we like to call guilt and judgment. For example, for me, one of my quote frustrations, or one of the areas that I find draining, is invention. And I've got some other people, some other consultants or some friends that have a great gift of invention. And if I'm given a blank slate and told to invent something on my own, I'm like, oh, how draining. So I could feel bad about myself and go, how come I'm not as good at invention as Justin is, or as Clinton, or as Heather is, and I can look at these other people and feel bad about myself. That's not going to be super productive. I have to realize that we're all have different strengths, and I have things that are energizing to me that they may not have. So it helps me have a better orientation towards myself, but also towards others. Fundamental attribution error is something you might have heard about in college. Pat loves to talk about it frequently. It's just that tendency that we have when we see something in ourselves, we tend to give an excuse for it. The example that Pat uses all the time is driving. Like, I'm driving fast and it's like, oh, it's because I was late and I was held up and so I'm in a hurry. And so that's not a reflection on who I am. It's just because of my circumstances. But if I see somebody else driving fast, I'm like, they must be reckless and they're not a thoughtful person. Begin to make all of these assumptions or attributions to their character. This happens in the workplace as well. So again, in the language of Working Genius, there are people who are a part of the same team. One of them, their genius, what they really care about, get kind of have that magnetic pull towards, say, is tenacity. The report has to be finished on time, and all of this. Somebody else on their team has tenacity as their frustration. It comes to Tuesday at noon, the report's not done. The person with tenacity as their genius is getting all agitated, and they think, why is that person doing that? They know how important this is. They're only doing this to irritate me. And so it causes interpersonal conflict. And it's like, maybe they're not doing it to irritate you. Maybe this is something that's just very draining for them. So when we can have some of that understanding, it helps us understand one another so that we can work together more effectively. Last slide before we pause for some more discussion and for some more interaction here in a moment. This is what we like to call the all-in-one model. So you see the three phases of work: ideation, activation, implementation. You see some of the elevation. A new component that you haven't seen yet is this middle dotted line that goes down the middle of responsive and disruptive. If you do the Working Genius assessment, you'll get a report that has as those 2x2 categories, as we said, where 2 of these are going to show up as your geniuses, 2 are going to show up as competencies, and 2 are going to show up as frustrations. Sometimes people have as both of their geniuses, either the disruptive geniuses or the responsive geniuses. In those cases, we call an individual a double disruptor or a double responsive person. Again, that's not always the case, but sometimes it is. So for example, one of the schools that I was working with, the principal of the school had the combination of being IT, invention, and tenacity. And I work with a couple of other CEOs outside of the school industry where that's the case. When we put these pairings together, that particular pairing, just by way of example, is called the methodical architect. Think about it. Each pairing has a name. The methodical architect, because they come up with an idea, they invent something, and then they want to see it implemented right away. And both of their geniuses are disruptive. So because they're like, I've got an idea, now everybody go make it happen. And then that person had on their team somebody who has the pairing of DE, discernment and enablement. Those are both on the responsive. So when the inventor is coming up with an idea, I've got an idea, let's go do this. And the discerner's like, wait, can we think about it? And what about this? And especially with that enablement side, how is that going to impact the athletic department? And what impact is that going to have for our English teachers? And have we considered this? And for the person who jumps from invention to tenacity, they're like, why are you getting in the way? Why are you slowing us down? We've got it. I've got the idea. It's a good idea. Let's just go do it. And the other person is, but we've got to respond and think about all these other aspects and these other people. And you see how that happens, and that can cause friction. So, but we like to say, just like you need all 3 phases of work, just like you need all 6 geniuses, you need both responsive people on your team and disruptive people on your team so that you're considering both. Without the responsive people, you won't be considering the people side and slowing down. Without the disruptive side, you'll stay status quo and won't be ever willing to really shake things up and change things as they go. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you, and kudos to you. You've stayed with us for a long time. There's a lot there. Let me pause now and let's make this interactive. Let's get some questions. I want to hear what you're thinking, get some discussion, either from just speaking out loud or into the chat. Let's get some discussion here.
Dan, I have a question. This is Jessica. As team members, we don't always have the opportunity to pick the others on our team, right?
Yeah.
Superintendents are usually the ones who are, putting together the cabinet, and if they are unaware of this, sometimes they are picking those with their own strengths and building a team that is very one-sided. And I think where the burnout comes from so many of our members is that you are the one person that isn't maybe the idea person, you're the get things done person. How do you work with a team that is maybe one-sided into the wonder and lots of great new ideas? I've worked on a team where every Monday's cabinet was a new idea and project, and by next Monday it was, oh, we forgot about that one, and you'd worked on it all week. So what tools can you use as an individual that is tasked with the work to help work as a team better and to manage your own work?
Great question, Jessica. I think, and I see this often, where there's an imbalance on either side. When we talk as we continue to go on here for the next 45 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever it is, we'll talk about that with particular application to projects. But your question is a great one in regards to where people are. I think the first piece would be maybe like what Nicole was saying earlier, begin to raise that level of discussion with the superintendent or whoever it may be to say, I think there's some things that we're missing here that are keeping us from being as effective as possible. Can we consider? And if, again, one of the beauties of Working Genius is its simplicity. Even if you didn't do all that we've done today in this first half an hour-ish or so, because after a few minutes of introductions, if you just took the 3 phases of work, there tends to be 3 phases of work. There's an ideation phase, there's an activation phase, and there's an implementation phase. You could say to a superintendent, I see some great things that are coming out of, our discussions around the ideation phase. I think we're sometimes missing it or overwhelming the people who are on the implementation phase, or we're missing it in how we translate those ideas into successful implementation. And often that would be the case because they've missed the activation stage in the middle as well. So again, one of the organizations that I've worked with a group of lawyers, when I showed this model to them, I said, what do you notice? Or I said, mention a recent project as I had done with you earlier. They said, oh, I see this pattern all the time for us. We've started with the idea phase, and our CEO is really strong there. And so he says, here's what we're doing. And so everybody on the team they were heavy on the implementation side, they just start doing it. They had never done the discernment and the galvanizing. So then all of the work they were doing on the implementation side had to get undone, and they didn't have to go back to the activation phase. They had to go back to the ideation phase to re-ideate, so that then they could catch the process of discernment and galvanizing, so that then they could appropriately put it into implementation. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Jessica, does that help? I would say probably the first thing, seek to have a conversation with the superintendent or leader, whoever it is. I think there's some things that we might be missing here, even just by these 3 phases. Can we have a discussion about how we more effectively take those great ideas and bring them into implementation? That would be a place to start. Jessica, do you want to respond to that, or is that enough for now?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, good. What other questions do we have? Observations? Emily, maybe in a moment you can remind me of some of those comments that came in the beginning, because maybe we can, I can touch on those now. I think one of those was, what if we bring new members on? Somebody had asked, what about if we bring new members on? Again, I would say an awareness of this model. Again, let me say it as I said earlier, I'm a fan. We are fans of so many of the models that are out there, strengths finders, other various types of personality tools. Really huge fan of all of them. We're finding with people that they're getting quicker traction because of the simplicity of this model. In 5 minutes, you can understand the 3 phases of work. In 10 or 15 minutes, you can take the assessment and get an idea of your own geniuses, so that you can think about and you can see how this affects, projects. This is a productivity tool, as we say. So if you're thinking about bringing new team members on, and I'll say a little bit more about this later, think, where do they fit? I would say if a team has, if it's prior to hiring a new member, think about where you're at, either yourself or your team. For example, I've done this with teams and when we do this with teams, we look at a team map. We take the top 2 geniuses, that pairing for each member of the executive team or school leadership, and we map it out according to these 6 areas. I've done this with teams where, for example, they have nobody with galvanizing on their team. Nobody with galvanizing. They desperately need someone like Trinette on their team. Because then I'll ask them, I'll say, how does this show up for you? And they say, we do our, admin meetings, principal and assistant principals. We do those meetings. We come up with some good ideas. Then we go out there and we begin to implement them. And we find that all of our department coordinators or whatever, they're not on board, and there's kind of not a lack of excitement. I'm like, you have nobody that's doing any you just skipped galvanizing and you thought it wasn't important. Like, you can't do that. Like, if Trinette was at the place of hiring somebody, we might say to Trinette, hire somebody who has a tenacity genius. Because you see how that gets to that issue of a new team member? Because she's like, this is draining for me. And let me again give you another practical piece. A very, very, very practical piece. When you see an area like that, when you're able to draw upon the geniuses of somebody else on your team to pull in. Again, I'll preempt the objection or the resistance, the pushback that I get on that sometimes. especially with educators. They say, we're all so busy. I don't want to ask anybody to do anything else. If you say to a person who is in their area of genius, hey, can you spend 10 minutes helping, if Trinette was able to have somebody that was a part of her team say, hey, that loves that kind of stuff, what Trinette's having to do that she finds energizing, there is somebody else who loves that. And when you say to that person, hey, would you help me with this? You're giving a gift to them and you're helping them not burn out, not because you're giving them more, but because you're giving them something that they love. One of my geniuses is discernment. It's part of why I love leadership coaching. So when somebody says, hey, Dan, we've got some ideas, or I've got these things I've been thinking about, can I get 15 minutes on the phone with you to brainstorm this? And can, just kind of do some sounding board? That's not like a drain for me. That's like inviting me to a candy store. I'm like, great. You're not asking me to invent something. You're asking me to help you discern it and make it better. I'll do that all day long. Like, that is fun for me, right? So that maybe helps in regards to team members. What also maybe say, again, having the awareness can help. Emily, was there anything else there that we should hit?
I think you've covered it. The other thing was understanding differences and team strengths. And I think we've been covering that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, then for the sake of time.
And there might be one more thing that'd be helpful for our crowd. Those that are studying for your APR or have your APR, kind of like, where does this align? Look at Jackie Dillard over there going, yep, you were thinking it, weren't you? So I was just kind of thinking through, so for our 4-step process, it's research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. So you can easily align this with some of these project phases where there's wonder and invention and maybe a little bit of discernment when we're doing our research, right? What is going wrong? What is the opportunity? How do we learn more about our audiences? How do we decide what are the best platforms to use? And then galvanizing and enablement, like how do we recruit the right people into this project and create a plan to where we have, for example, influencers who are encouraging students to come into this program. If you're trying to do like some kind of marketing campaign, right? And then the actual enablement and tenacity is implementation, right? Making sure that we are following through with what we put into our plan. And then the only piece that our RPI process adds is that evaluation piece, which maybe even be going back around to the very beginning again. Like, I wonder how we could get even better at this.
Bingo, Trinette, bullseye. That's exactly right. Because we've had that question before. What about the evaluation phase? It's coming back around to the wonder, to begin asking the questions. What did we do that worked? What could have been better? And then once you're asking those kinds of questions, the inventor is going to go, oh, I've got an idea. What if we tried this way? And then you're back through the process again. So exactly right. Love that connection. Trinette, let me just ask you, maybe you and Jessica, as leaders for CalSPRA, what do you think would best serve the community here? We could easily fill the next 30 to 40 minutes through other aspects, continuing to have some interaction, or we could break up for a brief breakout section. But if we do, we're going to have to compress some of the other aspects that we have. I'm willing to do whatever best serves this community. Between Jessica and Trinette, what do you think?
I think breakouts might be good for our folks to be able to just process this in smaller groups.
Great. So let me tell everybody that's here. I know that sometimes we have to sign off early or this or that. Let me ask you to come back after the breakout, because I really want to bring it to some of the areas that we begin to synthesize and put together. We've highlighted a number of very practical aspects along the way, but I really want to synthesize and put together what are going to be some key takeaways for you in regards to addressing burnout, in regards to addressing meetings, and in regards to projects. We really want to come back and highlight some of those aspects. So we'll do a brief breakout. I'll give some instruction about that in a minute, but make sure you come back. We'll give some more of those nuggets, and we'll make sure that we're done by 1 o'clock as well. Here's what I'd like to ask you to do in your breakouts. We've mentioned talking about a recent project. maybe for the breakout, talk about an upcoming project that you have, that you're working on, or that your team is working on. Think about something maybe for the upcoming school year ahead, and think about how Working Genius could be a lens to help you improve that project. Make sure that you're not missing any of the phases or geniuses, pieces like that. If you don't have a good example of a upcoming project, then do a recent or a past project to say, how did we do? What happened here? And talk about it. What we want for you here is for you to begin thinking and working with the model, seeing how this makes a difference in regards to projects. Stay with us and come back in a few minutes, and we'll then tie some of these other practical pieces together. So Trinette, I'll leave it to you to release people to breakouts.
All right. I put everybody in separate rooms except for the group that has the Zoom board meeting. I'm just going to leave you in your own room by yourself so you could all just work together in real life. Hey, Amy, good to see your face.
Hey, I just sent you a message. I don't know if you saw it. I have to hop out
I
for a
did.
website training. So I don't know if you need to.
No worries. No worries. I saw that right in time to move some things around.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This has been so helpful, and I'm super excited to, hopefully if we have access to the recorded piece too, I'd love to share it with my team as well. So I appreciate you guys offering this for us.
Great.
All right. I'll
I'll
see you
see you
later.
soon.
All right. Yes. See you in NSPRA. Bye, Dan. Thank you. Bye, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a couple of rooms that they haven't joined.
Nobody came
I
to my
did.
room.
What, Nicole?
Nobody came to my room 7.
Yeah, we're
I
gonna.
think you have some Fresno people who are all meeting with each other. So let me move you into a different one.
Okay.
How about room 1?
Okay.
Doesn't look like anyone's.
Oh, wait, never mind. Hold on. I gotta move her again.
Move her to like maybe 2 or 4.
4. Okay. Poor thing. She's gonna be all over the place.
Like what? Oh, okay.
And
Jane,
yeah.
Brittany, and Margaret. Okay, are together. That's why they're not in the group.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay. Now it looks like everybody is in a group. Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2. We're good.
Yeah, this was my world during Zoom teaching.
Yeah, breakout room.
I'll bet.
Don't miss the breakout rooms.
Yes. Good. For those of us that are here, Trinette or Jessica, any feedback, adjustments so far as we look at going ahead?
Oh, I think
it's great.
it's great. Yeah, it's, and I asked the question because so much of it is going to be dependent on us, right?
Yes.
Because it's often frustrating, and the feedback that I receive from other members is, well, they don't, these leaders don't understand, or the people in the business department aren't thinking this way or that. And it's like, you're not going to change how they're thinking or working. You need to adjust how you're working, and recognize that, I loved the tip that you put in, Emily, about doing something that you like and then something that you're not loving, and then doing something you like and sandwiching in between, because that's the way that, we have to find those workaround tools to make it work, because we're not changing the others, we're not forming the team. It just can create some frustration, and you're just going to sit there and be frustrated with no positive outcome.
Mhm.
This way we can find ways to work within the system. And a lot of times those in education leadership really are those big idea, not the, boots on the ground, getting the work done. And we need those big idea people to move organizations forward, but it can be frustrating for the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good
Wow.
comments, Jessica. Yeah.
I
Good.
may be curious how many of our PR people are galvanizing.
It,
Mm.
Because
it,
it seems
it
like
would
a
be,
natural fit.
it would be interesting by I've been noticing some things by profession, and if where there are maybe more tendencies in one way or another. Yeah, but to your point, Jessica, I find a number of people who are in the educational world who have some of those ET components, some of the enablement tenacity components, because they love to help.
Yeah.
It's that people side, and they love to just get things done.
Yeah.
And when they stay there, which is great, they're not tapping in enough to those earlier phases and considering new ideas. They're like, we just have got to do this, and we've got enough to do, and we're just going to keep doing what we've always done before. And they need to move back up to those earlier phases. So it's good.
Yeah, especially in, this cycle, like this is what I do every June. This is what I do every July.
Yeah.
This is how I do it every August. And that's something that a lot of school PR people love about the work, is that it's the same every year. But sometimes we miss that that means every year we have the opportunity to improve upon.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I think it's would be interesting just in terms of thinking about public relations campaigns, is like thinking of these strength areas as separate audiences. So when you're doing change management and you have a new campaign, think about, oh, the people with wonder and dementia, they're going to be thrilled that we have a new system and a new website.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And then they're like, for each kind of area, it's almost like a different audience group that you have to create messaging for and reach out in different ways.
Good. Good. Yeah, that's great.
Jessica and I laughed over it because, like, conference planning, we were just working really closely together.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, let's get all the people in, let's do all these cool programs. And she's like, what about the name tags? I'm like, I don't care about the name tags.
Totally. You can see it. I can see it. Yeah. It'll be interesting, Jessica, when you do this and see where you land in those respects.
Yeah. I'm very aware of where my strengths lie and where those frustrations are, because I can't talk about the other thing until the name tags are done.
That was this person who was like, I can't think about anything else until we've decided who's doing lockup. And everyone's like, what? But they're like, but we've got to, and it's like that. Like, remember I said, it's a magnetic pull. It's like, just pulls you in this direction to say, we've got to get this. So I'll say something when we all come back together about a tool that we use to help in that regard. That is, teams have been finding very helpful.
Great.
Yeah, that's good. Our last 20 to 30 minutes will go by quickly because of a number of pieces here, but we'll be able to move through it. How, Jessica and Trinette, as my pace? Sometimes I go fast because there's a lot that I'm moving through. Is the pacing okay?
Yeah, I think it's fast, but I think most of us are welcome that pace. So
Okay.
I think
Okay, good.
I don't think I'm a good judge because I'm kind of familiar with the model. So
Okay.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Emily, any input in that regard?
I think you're going at a great pace. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Good.
we want to give
I'm gonna go check in to some of the rooms and just see how people are doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
We'll wrap up. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Great stuff in room 2. Or yeah, room 2.
Are we ready to pull people back?
I think so.
Great.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. when
Okay.
you-
Bringing them back.
Trinette,
In 5 seconds.
we'll try that while we're waiting. You said there were some great things that you saw in one of the breakouts. Do you want to give us a highlight?
Well, like when I went and visited room 2, they were just kind of talking about how different people might be excited to be involved in different parts of the project, and like making sure that you're reaching out to the right people to recruit them for different pieces.
Good. Yeah.
It's kind of like what we're doing with CalSPRA right now with reimagining our volunteer service, which is instead of being on a committee for a whole year, it's like, here's some specific opportunities. If they appeal to you, jump in and do that.
Yep. Yeah, to use that language again, and even for you, Trinette, and for others that are listening as well. Imagine if somebody invited you into the space where the work was in the activation phase, where there's going to be a lot of galvanizing, how differently that would feel than if somebody invited you to say, hey, would you step in this phase where there's a lot of tenacity work that has to be done? Those are going to be totally 2 different types of experiences for you. And that's true for everybody, just it's different for each one. So say you can jump in this space where it's something that you absolutely love, then that's really helpful.
All right, everybody is back now, Tam.
Okay, great. Thank you for entering into those good discussions. And that is really, really helpful. So I want to just take a quick moment before we get back to Working Genius to get a bigger picture. I said that Working Genius is just one of the things that we do. There's a bigger picture of really, as I said earlier, the success of your organization comes from the strength of your team. Let me just give a quick highlight of this, and I'll literally just speed run through this in a minute or in 2 minutes. We often talk, and if you've heard Pat Lencioni or the organization talk about, great organizations have to be both smart and healthy. Smart is not just intellectual property, but it's all of the things that are often considered decision sciences in true for educators themselves. Like at a school site, they might put curriculum and the wellness program and safety, but they're also going to have technology. But in businesses, you see, like, here are the things that we actually do to do our business. And what happens sometimes is when organizations say we want to get better, they just double down on that SMART column without paying attention to the right-hand side, which is minimal silos, minimal confusion, high morale, high productivity, low turnover. You can see how Working Genius even connects to this right side of the column. And we like to say that health, you need both smart and healthy, but healthy is the multiplier of smart. So really what I do through executive or leadership coaching and working with teams is help strengthen the health of the team, help strengthen teams. Because when you're stronger on that right side of the column, everything you do on the left side of the column, the smart side, is going to get better because you're going to have better decisions. Another minute on this. We often talk about, so I just want you to all see a bigger picture, that there's a bigger picture than just Working Genius. 4 disciplines of a healthy organization. Because most times when people, almost always, when people see that smart and healthy thing, they say, okay, I get it. We've been investing all of our energies to being smart in what it takes to do our business. We need to know how do we then grow a healthy organization? And we talk about, you've got to first of all build a cohesive leadership team, build a really strong leadership team. Second, you've got to create clarity. Again, it's shocking how often I go into organizations, and the higher you get to the top, the more confident that you are, the more misled that you are, how clarity is in your organization. People are like, I talk to CEOs or senior vice presidents, and they're like, oh yeah, my team is completely clear. And then I ask the team, and they're all over the place. They don't have any, they have totally different ideas. So people are rowing in different directions. Once you have that clarity, we like to say you have to over communicate that clarity so it cascades throughout the organization and then reinforce it. In terms of building a cohesive team, many of you are also familiar with, long before Working Genius, Pat Lencioni was known for his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Healthy teams have to be built on the foundation of trust. In the absence of trust, or with low trust, there's a fear of conflict. When there's a fear of conflict, there's a lack of commitment. When there's a lack of commitment, there's an avoidance of team accountability. And in the avoidance of accountability, there's an inattention to team results. We work with teams, I work with teams to help them build a positive, strong foundation of trust so they can have the real conversations, not have an artificial harmony, but have real conversations that are going to sharpen and make better ideas, better decisions, so that the team's really bought in with commitment, so that the team holds each other accountable, so that everybody is moving in the same direction and the team is moving towards team results, not just individual results. That transforms aspects. So that was my 2-minute or 3-minute version of just a high level. I don't want you to think this is just about Working Genius. Working Genius is one of the tools to help strengthen your team. We're going to come back and I'm going to move fast in the last 15 minutes because we want to honor your time. We're thankful that you're here. And I want to touch those 3 big areas again. Burnout. One of the things that we have found so helpful with people within teams is to highlight what each of these geniuses value. So we talked about what they crave or what they're crushed by. So think about for yourself, but also especially think about for those that you work with. Doing these things, giving them what they crave and avoiding what they are crushed by will help minimize burnout. I'm making this very practical for you. This is one of the ways you address burnout for your team. Wanderers, they are asking those big questions. So they love consideration and they feel crushed by who cares. I know individuals where this is really the case, where an individual, a part of it, leadership team for a school, they have the genius of wonder, and everyone else on their team, they're the only one on their team with the genius of wonder. And everyone else on their team is like, why are you always up in the clouds? They even use that phrase with her. We have things to do. Why are you asking those? And it's just, it makes her want to leave her job. It's not, so you got to have this awareness. Those who who have the genius of invention, they want to create things. They want to come up with stuff. And one of the worst things you could do for them is say, well, we have to just do it the way we've always done it before. So again, this is like how you work with your team. Discernment doesn't mean that you have to always agree, but at least listen to the intentions. One of the things I hear people say with discernment is they said, sometimes I'm afraid my team members see me as negative because I'm trying to refine their ideas. They're not trying to be negative. They're trying to help make the ideas better, at least listen to their ideas. Galvanizers, Trinette, tell me if this resonates or if it doesn't. Most galvanizers, they want reaction. And so the worst thing, when they get passionate about, hey, this is exciting, let's go see what we can do. And if you're just like, oh, like you're falling asleep, you're like, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. That seems like so boring. Like, you're like, what? You're like, you want to wake up. Like, this is important, right? Like, so give them some reaction, even if you disagree. Those with enablement, remember, their genius is to help. So they want to just have it acknowledged, not always public. Because sometimes people, when we say this, they say, well, because that maybe they're an introvert. They hate putting up on stage and don't embarrass me and all that. But they want to know that their contributions are making a difference. Tenacity, they love clarity. So, remember that story I told about the high school that was going to have a first year of graduating high school? When I was in the midst of this, we were talking to them. Some of them started saying, oh yeah, but at one point I went with the principal and it would be the week before home, like 3 days before homecoming. And they would say, their principal would say, you know what, maybe we should reconsider what we're doing for the halftime of homecoming. And everyone else is like stressing out because they're like, you can't change this right now. Like that really stresses those people out. So understanding this will help you minimize the burnout of the people that you work with. Okay. The other thing to highlight around burnout is, as I said earlier, and I think Emily put this in the chat, put as bookends on either side of when you're doing things that are draining, something that's energizing for you. Okay. A third thing in regards A third thing in regards to burnout, I've already highlighted this, but just to make it explicit here. When you're having to do something that's draining for you, when possible, pull somebody else in. So that team that I mentioned that says we don't have anybody on our team that has galvanizing, pull them in. And again, remember my response there when they say, they don't have time for this. They love doing that. If Trinette could find somebody who loves tenacity and could help in some of those spreadsheet aspects, yeah, connect. And then they're like, I can do that I can spend an hour or two doing that to just help support you, even if it's not in a paid capacity. People will do that. So find people. When I have to do inventing, I don't do it on my own. I find one of my coworkers, one of my fellow consultants, and I say, hey, will you spend a half an hour with me and help me get the wheels going on the invention side? And then I could kick in some of my discernment piece and make it better. So you get that idea, include somebody else. Within teams, there's a whole nother dynamic of a pairing exercise. We talked about the top two areas. I'm going to skip that for the sake of time. But let's go to projects. So I highlighted burnout. The second is projects. Here are some things to I'll let you just look at the screen for what happens when you miss some of these areas. So I worked with teams at times, they don't have anybody in wonder or very little invention. They never slow down to ask big questions or consider big picture pieces. One of the examples that Pat likes to give here is, again, way outside the school district, but he says, when people were saying, hey, we've got these problems of our parking lots are full because people are coming to our stores, but they have a hard time parking, so they don't like coming to our stores. Somebody was asking the wonder question of, what if we didn't need parking lots? And then you have Amazon. Like you don't have, and I'm not advocating for Amazon, but you don't have something like that if you don't have somebody who's willing to ask a question. What if people didn't have to come to the store to get their stuff? What if they didn't need a parking lot? What if we just shipped it right to them? Same thing. I've talked about teams that are missing galvanizing, teams that are missing discernment. We've got these ideas, but they never took the time to refine them. And so then they see all this clunkiness. If you're missing tenacity, they're like, well, we never hit our product deadlines, on and on and on. So you want to watch for that and then look for people that you can pull in to help you. Here's a snapshot. And this is just again, get the wheels turning, projects. This idea. So one of the things I would say very practically in regards to projects is make sure you're considering the 3 phases of work and the 6 types of genius. There are different questions here. And so for the way I usually do this is not what we've done today, where there's a bunch of different people from different organizations or through a part of this association or network. Often the most common way that I do this is with an individual team. And I've done it with teams of 5. I've done it with teams of 50. And then we look at the team and say, where are our team's strengths? Where is the team balanced, or is the team overweighted? And what are the things that we need to consider as we're moving through this new project? Somebody, I think back at the beginning, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody back at the beginning said, well, what about our strategic planning process? I think you can see with what we've walked through, I would say in a strategic planning, first of all, make sure you're in that ideation phase, but then make sure you walk through each of these phases so that you begin to move it through effectively. We won't have time to go through this in detail, but here's a fuller look at what happens if we miss or if we overuse. Sometimes we talk about over-indexing. I'll just let you read a little bit. It's that middle column there is what the genius does. The top column is what happens if we're overusing these particular areas. The bottom line is what happens if we're missing those. I want this to be one of your walkaways. I really hope this is one of your walkaways. There are going to be things that we are not as effective about our projects if we're either over-indexing to one side of these or missing one side of these. I've done it. I recently did Working Genius with the team. That team was about 7 or 8, and about 90% of the team's geniuses were in enablement and tenacity. They had one genius that was in, so with a team of 8, like there was 2 geniuses for each individual, there'd be 16 geniuses. One of them was in the ideation phase, one during invention, and one of them was in the activation phase. So it was like and when I first was describing that, they said, we spend so much time in discernment. And really, they came to realize they weren't spending so much time in discernment. They were just doing a lot of discussions, a lot of long and ineffective meetings. We'll come to meetings in a minute. But their meetings were all in the weeds to the like nth degree in the weeds of enablement and tenacity discussions. And they were just caught all up in the weeds. So they weren't doing enough ideation, they weren't doing enough discernment and galvanizing, and so they felt like they were bogging down in their projects and they weren't ever introducing anything new. So I shared with them the Amazon piece and they were like, oh, we haven't ever even asked questions about what could be different in our realm. Here are 5 signs of success that we often highlight. I'll move through these quickly and then I'll make a comment out of meetings. Use the vocabulary. For example, one of the principals or superintendents that I've worked with, their pairing is invention and galvanizing. They happen to be double disruptive. Language that became super, super helpful for them was for the team to learn the language and then to say to the superintendent, are you inventing or are you galvanizing? Remember, those are different. And inventors will throw out 17 ideas in 3 minutes. They love it. They're like, well, what about this? And maybe we should try this. And we could do this. Her team was interpreting her as if she was galvanizing, like, let's go do this right now. That's more of the galvanizing energy. So her team was a bunch of enablement and tenacity people. So every idea that she'd throw out there, they'd start running and doing it. And she's like, why did you go and do all of that? I was just brainstorming. So it became super helpful for them to just have the language of, are you inventing now or are you galvanizing now? Okay. So use the vocabulary. Remember your own and others' geniuses so that you can support for yourself, not having burnout, support others. Third, call out the altitude in meetings. I'll come back to this one in a minute. Lean on one another's geniuses. I've talked about that one a lot through here. And you use the model to inform hiring needs. We talked about that one a bit here as well. Let me bring it back to the 3 things that I said we would talk about at the beginning, and then I've got a final closing piece here for us as well. For burnout, for yourself and for your people, help people focus on their geniuses, what energizes them, and then also pay attention to what's the patterns for recharging. I've highlighted those. Projects, make sure you're drawing on all 6 geniuses. Here's the thing on meetings. Identify and name the phase of work. This again, I'm like, this is so simple, all of you. If this is all that you did, you would find it helpful. One of the superintendents that I've worked with, they began framing their meeting agenda with sections of, are we in ideation phase? Are we in activation phase? Or are we in implementation phase? There were some interactions while some of you were in breakout. Jessica, remember I said I would come back to something? People have found this super helpful. So let's just say, for example, someone has that magnetic pull. That's what I've talked about it as, a magnetic pull towards implementation. So if they're in a meeting, it just helps those people to know, hey, we're in ideation phase right now. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes in ideation phase. Those of you that are really concerned about implementation, thank you so much. We need your implementation. We will get to the implementation discussions, but that's not right now. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes in ideation. Next week, when we come back to the same topic in our staff meeting, we're going to be in the activation stage. We're going to take the ideas that we talk about today and refine them, discern them, see who we need to galvanize and get on board. We will eventually get to the implementation phase, but right now we're here, and you name it. And so then they would have, instead of having a list of here's our number of agenda items, they would have on the list, here's the items that belong in the ideation bucket, here are the items that are in the activation bucket, and here are the items that are in the implementation bucket. You get in a different mindset. That will help meetings in and of itself. We only have 3 minutes left, and this is what I would love to have some of you chat on. I'd love to put it either in the chat, and if some of you can, and we've got 2.5 or 3 minutes left. I'd love to hear you speak up. Either what's significant to you from today, or what are your key takeaways and next steps. I think Emily is also putting in the chat her email and mine. We'd love to have you reach out to us, either if it's more for working genius with you or your organization or your team, or also just coming alongside to strengthen the organization through whatever capacity that may be. But I'd love to hear from you in our last 2 minutes, have some of you speak. What's been significant to you from today, or what are your key takeaways or next steps from this time?
I'll go. I think using that last tip that you just shared about, hey, on your agenda, rather than just all the items, it's actually grouping them together so that you can truly stay on track in which part of the project you're working on. I'll be implementing that today.
Good. Super helpful. Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Just by saying, hey, yep, good. Thank you so much for saying that. That's awesome. Good. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jacqueline. Were you finished?
Yes. Yeah, that was it.
Great. Thanks for saying that. I'd love to hear from somebody else, at least one more. We've got 1 minute left.
Christine put in the chat that the Poway team is going to be taking the assessment and then discussing their geniuses and frustrations and how they can work better as a team.
Great.
I think there's a lot of people, Jessica and I, when we were first introduced to this, kind of talked about how we've been in teams where maybe we had really different geniuses from other people in the team. And you can interpret that as like, gosh, I really struggle to work with that person. But having this lens really helps you see like, oh, they can bring these strengths if we just structure our meetings and our projects in a way that bring people in to where they're good at it.
Yeah. And we need each other. We need each other. Yeah, for sure. I think Emily is putting into the chat as well. We'd love if any of you would want some discussion or engagement with us for how we help support you and your teams as you do this. We'd love to have those interactions with you as well. But I'll just say thanks to everybody for being on. Thank you, Trinette and Jessica, for the invitation and for the opportunity to share with the CalSPRA Association and group.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's very helpful. And I hope you put your email in the chat so they can stay connected. We'll be sharing out this recording. I want to be cognizant that it's 1 o'clock. So thank you for staying with us, and everyone have a really great day. Those of you traveling to St. Louis, safe travels, and I will see you there.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Dan, I got a direct message from someone asking if the slides would be shared. I told them the recordings were, but that we hadn't talked about the slides.
Yeah, I had anticipated that question. I know that you were doing the recording, which is great. I would probably say I wouldn't share this full slide deck, and there's a ton more in it because of some of the proprietary. I mean, I've built this slide deck on, together with our team, but it's a lot of this is table group proprietary material, and so when we
no problem.
When I put it out, then I don't know where else it goes, and I have to be mindful of that. So
yeah, that
I would
sense.
probably tell that individual I would love to have a follow-up conversation with them if there's some way that I can help engage or support them. And again, whether that's a working thing or not, I'd be happy to have a conversation with them about pieces they may use, but I don't want to turn over the whole slide deck.
Yeah. No
That's
problem.
great. Thank you.
We'll just include your guys' information when we do the follow-up with the recording.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. And you'll CC us on that as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think the both of you have Emily's just Emily at Hawkinson Consulting as well.
Okay.
And Emily, were you able to get Jessica's email as well?
I did. Yeah. She
Okay,
dropped
great.
it in the chat. Yeah. And then I put our emails into the chat as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this was helpful to you and to your crew. It was fun for me to be a part of. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think
What
so.
would-
Got a lot out of it.
Good. What would be a good next step for all of us together?
Well, definitely I'll be probably packaging the recording and putting it all together. I have no idea why I didn't start recording right away. Like we
yeah.
literally, this Zoom account records everything.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
our personal, me and Jessica meetings, like we constantly have to turn it off. And this is the one meeting it didn't automatically turn on. Thank goodness she noticed, because she's got tenacity. So she noticed.
Good
I
job,
didn't
Jessica.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
those
wait,
attention to
sorry.
attention to details. That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
but
it might be a little bit, because our kind of our video person is on vacation for a couple weeks.
Okay.
But we'll be following up with the package and then encouraging everyone to get in touch with you guys.
Great. Good. How many did it look like there were total today?
I think about 30.
Okay.
yeah, I saw 32. Yeah, somewhere in there.
But then it's a little bit misleading, because like I went into room 2 where Colin McClashen was, and there were like people gathered around his desk. So you might see one person, but then there.
Yeah.
Folsom Cordova had everybody in their boardroom. So it's a little bit misleading in terms of whole numbers.
Yeah, I don't even know all the school districts that were here. I am familiar with Folsom Cordova, but haven't worked with anybody there. So that's a good opportunity to connect with somebody there too as well. So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, Emily, anything else that you have for us today?
No, it's all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great meeting you.
So nice to meet you. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Trina and Jessica, all that you added to this. Even Jessica, you sharing that link early on, that was super helpful. So thanks for
Yeah, I had a couple of people going, well, what if I don't know what these things mean? And I thought, oh, I saw this on the page. So that
was so helpful. Thank you.
Good. What was
Yeah.
the link that you had sent, that you shared?
It was from the page where we were directed to take the assessment.
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
it kind of, outlines the 6 and gives like a 1-sentence summary. So I thought that was
Yeah.
good.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. Yeah. There's a pretty nicely done Working Genius website. If you go to the Table Groups website, which is Pat and the team's website, that they have a link, obviously, that will redirect you to Working Genius, but there's a separate Working Genius assessment that people can go to. It has all kinds of information. People can take the assessment. If anybody asks you, any of you, if they're looking